Good evening, everybody. It's Stereo Police. I'm sorry I haven't been back with any interesting, edifying, or productive, or entertaining videos, which has been my intent. It is rather chilly tonight once again. I'm looking forward to winter passing. It's going to be down in the low teens tonight. I know for some of you folks out in the country that's nothing, but it's rather cold here for Central Virginia. I haven't quite adapted to it yet. Oh boy. So yeah, I've been busy, and thank you for those of you who have expressed concern for my wife, who broke a couple of ribs, and now taking over her duties around the house. And boy, there are a lot of them. Respect. And so I had a lot of aspirations to make some productive videos while I felt good, while I feel good, and they all kind of came to a screeching halt when she unfortunately broke a couple of ribs on some black ice in the driveway. Poor thing. She's recovering fine, but in a lot of pain. But I did want to make a vid as I'm sitting here on the back porch, relaxing from the day. Had to get out and take my dad out today, get him out of the house. Also had to do a lot of work in the stables with the horses today and prep them for tonight's cold temperatures, and do some work around the house. And have a little time right now. I thought I'd throw out a vid and say thanks, to read a couple of comments and give you an update on some forthcoming vids. Again, I want to be productive again, and that's coming up real soon. But tomorrow I'm going to head over to the Shenandoah Valley and get a gander at my 1985 Ram square body. I love old Ram 4x4s, the old square bodies from the 70s and 80s, well, hell, back even to the 60s. I've always been a fan of those trucks, and I finally acquired one on the cheap, and it needed a lot of work. And rather recently I discovered that the big man upstairs, the big guy himself, don't ask me how I discovered this, but I discovered that the big man upstairs, the man in the sky, actually drives an 80 square body Ram 4x4. And when I found that out, I asked him who his mechanic was. And of course, being all kind and full of grace and mercy, he told me. And he kindly lent me his mechanic, who has some spare time. It's unbelievable how I found this guy. An expert and a specialist in Ram square bodies. A guy who's a big rig diesel mechanic full time, but a specialist and an expert on, and I mean an expert on Ram square bodies. And it was a 1 in a million chance how I ran into this guy. Could have never ever happened again. And ever since then, I've had him working on my truck, and I'm going to make a video about that tomorrow. The guy's amazing. He's like if you coupled a Mensa with a mechanic, with a guy who's like full of integrity, a real intellect, and a perfectionist. Like just the absolute perfect mechanic. This guy's amazing. And I'm going to take advantage of it while he's got the time. And so I'm throwing a bunch of money at this truck, not at the body, but at the mechanics of it, at the mechanical parts of it, the suspension, the engine, transfer case. Because I want to make it my daily driver. 1985 D150 4x4 Prospector. Look that up. And I'm going to go over there and ask him if he'll allow me to do a walk around. It's still pretty torn apart, but I want to do a walk around, take a vid, put it on YouTube. A lot of people are interested in these trucks, so I'll hopefully post that tomorrow. And right now I want to read a couple of comments and address a couple of things, because I've got nothing else to do. I'm a third of the way through a cigar. All talking comes to a screeching halt when the cigar is done. So before that happens, let me read a couple of comments and address a couple of things just to fill some time, and to say thank you to all of you who take the time to write kind words, which I always greatly appreciate, and especially encouraging words. So I'm going to turn this phone around and read some and address a few comments. Hang on just a second. All right. Mr. Brennan, Mr. Barry Brennan writes, glad to see you back uploading regularly. Would love to see an amp shootout. You've got some buttes there. All the best. Hey, Mr. Brennan. Are you sure I don't know you? I know a guy who has a name real similar to this. Yeah, I've got the Yamaha AS1100. I've got the Rogue Audio, that tube amp. Rogue Audio Kronos Magnum 3, I believe it is. It's in mothballs right now. I've got the Luxman Class A integrated. That's a butte. Those are all buttes. And I've got a few more back there. And I need to do that. Everything came to a screeching halt. I planned to do a lot of things a couple of years ago when I got that year and a half's worth of really bad vertigo. And I didn't do a thing. My heart was barely able to work even. And everything came to a screeching halt, and I'm finally coming around to making up for that, to rectifying it. And I've got a lot on my plate, video-wise, to do that I plan to do. So yes, thank you for reminding me. I'm waiting for my new speakers to arrive, and I plan to do a speaker shootout real soon, but I want to do that, and I'm trying to improve the way I do things as well to make things a little more succinct and a little more fun. I always like to add fun to the mix as well. I think that reviewers are often I always like a little fun added to it. I think there's always room for fun in things. Serious business too, but just a little humor too. So that'll be coming up. The speaker shootout real soon, which I'm going to do speaker boxing. Covered that in a couple videos back. I had to stop for a moment to think. I couldn't remember. With the Uryu speakers, the Tecton Uryu speakers when they arrive versus the Klipsch monitors. RP600s, I believe. Don't quote me. I always forget which. I think they're the RP600Ms. Versus the ADS speakers, versus some Epicures that I have, versus the Eclipse Forte 3s. That'll be an interesting interesting card. Then I'll move over to the amps, and we'll go from there. Plus, I want to make a few educational videos as well. One of those is coming right up. Plus, I have my series of turntable vids I want to do on the Techniques SL 1200 GR turntable, a turntable that I love, and I want to commend to everybody, and I want to make a series of videos on that as well, in terms of why I love it so much. Crazy Kids. I'm guessing I know why you have that name. I can kind of figure that out. Says, I love the long videos. Thank you. Won't forget spending all the time watching and rewatching the Yamaha AS11 ones. I've had my 1100 for over a year now and love it. I've been refining my system since, and it now sounds crazy good. It has an AS1100, a Vincent DAC, a Yamaha Streamer, Celestion Ditton's great speakers. Classic. Decent cables too. Hey man, sounds like a great system. And I want to compare my Yamaha I'm not getting rid of my Yamaha AS1100. I don't have it hooked up now. I've got my Luxman in the system. I mentioned this in a previous vid. I remember after living with my Luxman for a while and switching in my Yamaha, I remember thinking that Yamaha at a third of the price, when I switched it in after getting adjusted to the Luxman, 3 times the price, maybe more, I remember thinking, I kind of like the Yamaha, maybe a little better. I remember thinking that when I did it once before, and I'm going to do it again. I don't care what anybody says. There's something special about that Yamaha, and there's certainly something special about that circuitry. It's not a typical Class AB. And those MOSFETs they use are just fantastic transistors. And the way they do it, that Yamaha is special. It's a special product. I think it's got its place in audio history. I really do. Hold on to that, baby. And I'm gonna that's a good segue into this comment up here. From I have a hard time pronouncing that. Not hard time pronouncing. I don't want to mispronounce it, but it's Vooch videos. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but basically, Vooch says that, again with the pronouns, not sure who you are, but he, she, it says, they, sorry, not it, but he, she, they says, respect, forgive me, respect everybody, that loved my AS 3000. That's a man, boy, would I love to have one of those. You know, I was about to throw down on one of those when I bought the Luxman. I got a really, really good deal on the Luxman because I know a guy who owns a shop, and about the time I bought those Klipsch horns, when I got 30% off the Klipsch horns, I got 30% off the Luxman too. And I said, fudge it. I'm going to go with the Luxman. Because I already have a Yamaha. But I got to say, I'd love to have the 3000. Now, you've got the 3000, and Vooch Video says that, hey, this, what came along? A Prima Luna tube amp came along that stole his heart, her heart. And that maybe selling the AS3000, and my comment was to the effect that, hey, I said, be careful. I'd advise keeping the Yamaha a little bit. I had this happen to me before when I fell prey to an overly sweet candy, just to learn later that what I had in my inventory, forgive my typos, just to learn what I really like I had in my inventory all along. What I meant to say by that was that sometimes, and I think you guys all know this, that especially with tube amps. They can come along and they can kind of steal your heart because of the quality, the nature of the sound. It may be a little overly sweet. There may be something to it, but sooner or later, you're going to miss that tight bass. I'm going to tell you, you listen to the differences in that bass punch and that bass kick and that tight control of that bass, that Yamaha. You listen to that. You go to those Prima Lunas. I know it's a good brand. I know they're highly acclaimed. You go back and forth, and there ain't going to be a comparison there. That Yamaha will blow it away. Now, it depends on what you're looking for. Everything is a compromise. Every type of circuit's a compromise. You get one thing for another. It's trade-off. You do get things with tubes you don't get with MOSFETs and vice versa. However, the MOSFET in the AS3000, the transfer function of a MOSFET is without getting into details, is really in the transistor world is the tube version. It's the same type of transfer function. So the MOSFET in the transistor, I'm trying not to get technical. I could go all over crazy with this. It's the closest thing in the transistor world you're going to get to a vacuum tube is a MOSFET. A tube is a voltage-controlled current source. So is a MOSFET. Whereas a bipolar junction transistor, commonly used in most amps, are current-controlled current sources. So the transfer functions are basically different. Now, I'm telling you, for a lot of reasons, hold on to that AS3000. Go ahead and listen to that Prima Luna for a while, and then sub in that AS3000. There are things about it. You come back to it, you might change your mind. Don't get rid of it right away. Hold on to it. I've had this happen to me before. I'm going to tell you where. It happened to me with the Rogue Audio Kronos 3s. I subbed that in, and immediately there was something. It seemed to have sweeter highs. It seemed to have more holographic. It seemed that way. I could go on, and I listened to it for a while, and then eventually I just felt that the bass was a little bit on the muddy side. Not muddy, but it just didn't give me the kick, the slam, the control. Tubes will never, ever give you that control that transistors can give you. They can't do it. Transistors have a very low output impedance and a very high damping factor that tubes can't. They just simply can't provide. It's not inherent to them. It's not intrinsic to them. They can't do it. And then also that, I don't know. I don't want to make this technical. I won't go on, but hold on to that AS3000. Sub it in a month, 2 months. You might be surprised. Don't do it. Careful. I was enamored with my Kronos. Magnum 3s, Rogue Audio. And one day I came back to that AS1100 and I ended up liking it better. Kronos has been in mothballs ever since, although it just could be the nature of our brains too. Maybe our brains have seasons. Maybe sometimes we just prefer. Sometimes it's fun just subbing things in and listening to them for a month and subbing another thing in and listening to it for a month. That's what I do, if you're able to. If you have to sell it, you have to sell it. We all have priorities in life. All right. Markump says, you're honest. Well, thank you. You know what? I've never been dishonest to you. And I'll continue to be that way, and if I ever make a mistake, I'll admit it and own it and correct it. That's my promise. Thank you. Now let me tell you how eccentric about hi-fi or about audio I am. One last thing, because I'm down to the nub of this cigar and my hands are cold. I made a purchase last night on. I made a purchase online last night, and it was I'm sure some of you guys can relate, not all of you, but you know, sometimes late at night, you know, midnight. It was midnight. Your inhibitions are down a little bit. Could have to do with a little bit of wine. But I purchased these guys right here. They're Criterions. Hang on a second. 25As. They look to be in fine shape. Classic bookshelf high speakers. Nothing special about them. They've got, I think they're beautiful looking. Nothing special about them. They were just in great shape. They caught my eye. Criterion was the brand. They're made in Japan. They're the brand of Lafayette Radio, which was a sort of a competitor of Radio Shack back in the day. Great shape. Probably a sealed enclosure. Paper cones. Looks like it's probably from an estate sale. Look at that furniture. Pretty inexpensive. And sometimes when I'm sitting back listening to, when I get into a mode where I want to hear some, for example, some old Hank Williams, Hank Snow, Ernest Tubbs, some old music from the 40s, 50s, even 60s. Buck Owens, maybe. I don't like modern country. I'm not even into country from the 70s unless it's maybe Glenn Campbell. Maybe a few others, but I'm not really a country. But I like some of the classic old country and western. And even some jazz from back then. But sometimes I want to listen to that music, which was, you know, there were very poor recordings. The recording technology wasn't very good. So listening to that through, you know, ultra high end, you're not really getting anything out of that. So sometimes I want to listen to that through a period system. A system that someone might have been listening to that music, a system that might have been sort of contemporaneous with the music itself. And that's part of the experience. And that's part of the listening experience itself. I don't know if that makes any sense to you or not. You just get into a zone, and sometimes I get into a Hank Williams zone where I sit back and I just want to listen to nothing but Hank. Some of his live tracks, or just, you know, I just love Hank. Who was I listening to today? Eddie Arnold. I did some Eddie Arnold today, and I did some Buck Owens today. And who was that other guy? Gosh darn it, who's the Wabash Cannonball Great Speckled Bird guy? I can't, it's not coming to me. Gosh darn it. Having a brain fart. But, so you listen to that, and, you know, the old Hank Williams records, they were very bad recordings. But it's not about the recording, and it's not about imaging or sound staging, or it's not even about that. It's about the music. And sitting there listening to it through a period system and looking at the visuals of the system itself as you're listening to the music is just part of the whole experience. So you're looking at this system that might have been, you know, a system from the 60s or maybe the 50s, for example. That might have been the exact same system that someone would have been listening to when that music was only 10 years old or 5 years old, or at least closer to the time point when that music was made or being played on the radio. You know, and I'm kicking back and I've got that system there. That's really special to me. So I'm putting together a system just for that purpose. It's going to be up in the cottage. And those speakers are the ones that I chose for it. It's going to be an inexpensive system. Those speakers are very inexpensive, but I just like the looks of them. They just look like something that some like a middle-class person would go into the store and buy to listen to that kind of music. You know, bookshelf speakers would be in the den. You turn on the radio, and that's the kind of music you'd hear. So I'm putting together that system, and those are the speakers I chose. They're and it's just something I'm going to experiment with. And up in the cottage, and I'm kicking back, and I'm going to listen to some old Hank on the turntable or what have you. I'm going to put those speakers into rotation, and I might even find an old. I'm not even sure what type of amplifier or receiver someone might have been using. I'm going to do some research and see about what year those speakers were made. I'm guessing probably 60s. I'm not sure. And maybe try to find, some kind of a receiver or integrated amp that I could couple those two, and then hook it, and then go from there. If you get the idea, but just part of the overall listening experience. And I never really thought of that. I'm not even sure how to put it. I'm just thinking out loud now, but just about what the system, the type of gear, the system being kind of contemporaneous with the music. And then how the system looks being part of the experience, the listening experience. And knowing, the psychology of it, knowing that, hey, this system would be something that, somebody would have had back then when this music was top of the pops, So I'm just experimenting with that. It's all part of the enjoyment of the hobby. It's all part of the passion of the hobby. Probably didn't explain myself so well because my mouth is about ready to, I think I have icicles hanging from my nose at this point. So I'm going to call it a night and go in. Just giving you an update. And thanks once again, everybody. I'm going to come back tomorrow, hopefully with a video about my truck. And I'm just going to post that on YouTube because a lot of people are really into those trucks, those Ram square bodies. And hope to be back real soon with more audio related content. Thanks, y'all. Have a great Saturday night. Although I have no idea when you're going to be watching this, but it's Saturday night now. Ciao. Stereo Police. Thanks, everybody. Love you guys.